Then he saw it. A dark shape moved between the trees, tall and silent. Not fully visible, but its presence was unmistakable. The same kind of figure that had invaded his cabin. The same kind that had destroyed her world. One of the hunters had followed them. Evan pulled the girl behind a large fallen log. He crouched low and whispered, "Listen carefully. When I move, you move with me. Slow, quiet, understand?" She nodded quickly, her eyes wide but focused. Evan peeked over the log again. The hunter stepped into a beam of light, and this time, Evan saw more details. Its armor was dark like burnt metal, covered in strange symbols. Its movements were unnaturally smooth. Like a machine guided by a deadly mind. It lifted its head, sniffing the air again. Searching. The girl pressed her hand over her glow to hide it. Her small body shook with fear, but she didn't make a sound. She was brave. Evan whispered, "We're moving. Stay right behind me." He guided her deeper into the trees, careful to step on soft ground. Every movement was slow, controlled, silent. The girl followed closely, copying every step he took. But the hunter heard something, a faint rustle, maybe from a leaf under her foot. It turned sharply, its visor glowing with a cold red light. The girl froze. Evan grabbed her hand and pulled her behind the next set of bushes. Just in time, the hunter walked toward the sound. Scanning the ground with deadly precision, Evan's mind raced. They needed to get away from this place. But running would draw attention. Fighting was not an option. There was only one small hope: outsmart the creature. He leaned close to the girl and whispered, "Trust me." She looked at him with frightened eyes. But then she did something brave. She touched his hand gently and nodded. Evan grabbed a small stone lying on the ground. He threw it far to the right, making sure it hit a cluster of dry leaves. Crack! The hunter instantly turned toward the noise and moved in that direction with long, heavy steps. It believed they had gone that way. Evan exhaled slowly. Now, move. They slipped away from the danger, walking deeper into the forest. The trees became thicker, the air cooler. The girl's glow slowly returned, faint but steady. After several minutes, they reached a small clearing surrounded by tall rocks. Evan stopped to breathe, checking if they were still being followed. The girl tugged his sleeve gently. He turned to look at her. She raised her hands again, making glowing particles appear. But this time, the image was different. Not fear, not destruction. Not hunters. A group of small figures, glowing softly like her, hiding in a cave. Her people, her family, her home away from home. She pointed toward the rocky trail ahead. Evan understood immediately. They're close? She nodded. A spark of hope lit her eyes for the first time since he found her. But just as they prepared to move, the ground behind them shook. A deep metallic growl echoed through the trees. The hunter had realized the trick. It was coming back. Fast at the tiny girl, panicked and stumbled backward. Her glow flickered wildly. Evan grabbed her shoulders gently. "Hey, look at me." She looked up with wide, trembling eyes. "You're not alone. Not anymore. We moved together. We survived together." She placed her hand over his heart again, giving him that same warm, glowing heartbeat message: trust, hope, belief in him. Evan stood straight, gripping her hand tightly. "Come on," he whispered. "Let's find your people." Behind them, the hunter roared again, closer now. Ahead of them, hope waited. Between the two, Evan chose to stand, to protect, to fight if he had to, because this tiny silent girl had given him something worth fighting for. The forest grew darker as Evan and the tiny alien girl moved deeper into the rocky trail. The air felt heavier now, as if the forest itself understood the danger chasing them. Every sound, every rustle, every crack felt sharp. The girl held Evan's hand tightly, her small fingers cold and trembling. But she didn't let go. Not for a second. Behind them, A deep metallic roar tore through the trees. The hunter was close again. Evan pulled her gently. "Don't look back. Just follow me." She nodded, her glowing eyes filled with fear but also strong, unshaken trust in him. They ran carefully through the narrow path between tall rocks. The ground sloped downward, making each step faster. The girl's small feet struggled to keep balance. So Evan scooped her up gently without stopping. She wrapped her arms around his neck, her silver glow flickering in panic. "Hold on," he whispered. The forest behind them erupted in heavy footsteps. Trees cracked. Branches ripped apart. The hunter wasn't just following, it was charging. Evan tightened his grip around the girl and ran faster. But he was only human. His legs burned. His breath grew short, and the weight of the child made each step harder. Still, he didn't slow down. He wouldn't let anything touch her. The girl looked over his shoulder and saw the shadows moving. She gasped silently and pressed her glowing hands against his chest. A soft warmth spread from her touch. Not magic, not a shield, just encouragement. A reminder, don't stop. "I believe in you." Evan pushed harder. The rocky path opened into a wider clearing surrounded by cliffs. A stream of glowing plants grew along the rocks. These weren't normal plants, they matched the girl's glow. Her people must have passed through here. "We're close," Evan said. "Just a bit more." But before they could reach the other side of the clearing, the hunter burst through the trees. Evan turned sharply. The creature stood tall and terrifying, blocking the only exit behind them. Its armor shimmered with cold symbols. Its visor glowed blood red. Every movement it made was deliberate, focused, precise. It was no longer searching. It had found them. The girl clung to Evan, shaking uncontrollably. Her glow dimmed until she looked almost invisible. Evan slowly set her down behind him and spread his arms protectively. "You're not taking her." The hunter stepped forward, each heavy stride making the ground vibrate. Evan's heart pounded, but he didn't step back. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a fighter. But at that moment, he felt like he could stand against an army. The hunter raised one clawed hand. A low, rumbling growl echoed. It was ready to strike. The girl stood up behind Evan, her small hands glowing weakly. Tears filled her eyes. She looked at him as if begging him not to sacrifice himself for her. But Evan shook his head without turning around. He whispered softly, "You're worth protecting." She covered her mouth with both hands, trying not to cry. The hunter lunged forward, but something unexpected happened. Soft silver beams shot across the clearing, not from the girl, but from above. Evan and the girl looked up. Figures stood on the cliffs, small, glowing figures with the same silver light as the child. Her people, survivors, many of them, dozens. Their eyes glowed with the same hopeful light. But their bodies carried scars and loss. They had been hiding. Watching. Waiting. The hunter turned toward the cliffs and roared loudly. The alien survivors raised their hands together. Their lights connected, forming a bright shimmering wave. The air vibrated with energy. Evan felt the girl's hand slip into his. Shaking but hopeful now, the shimmering wave shot downward like a falling star and struck the ground. Between Evan and the hunter, a bright explosion of silver light burst outward. The hunter stumbled back, armor cracking slightly. It wasn't defeated, but it was hurt for the first time. The girl stepped out from behind Evan and raised her little hands, adding her dim glow to the larger beam. It wasn't strong alone, but when her glow joined theirs, the silver wave grew brighter, stronger, louder. Evan watched in awe. Even among her people, her light mattered. The hunter roared again, angrier this time. It charged forward, but the combined wave of silver light struck it head-on. The creature flew backward, crashing into the trees with a heavy metallic crash. The ground trembled. Silence followed. The girl collapsed to her knees from exhaustion. Evan rushed to her and held her carefully. She leaned against him, breathing fast, her glow flickering but alive. Her people climbed down quickly from the cliffs. They surrounded Evan and the girl, glowing softly, whispering in voices made of light. Evan didn't understand their words, but he understood their meaning. They were grateful. The girl looked up at him with tired but bright eyes and smiled. A wider smile than all the others. A smile filled with gratitude, relief, and something deeper. She pointed to Evan, then pointed to her heart. A simple message. You're one of us now. He lifted the wooden door with one hand. It creaked softly. The girl flinched, her glow dimming. The second bang hit the door harder this time. Evan helped her climb down first. She crouched below, waiting for him. He climbed in after her and closed the trapdoor fully. Darkness swallowed them. Only her faint silver glow lit the tiny room. Dust floated in the air. The space smelled of old wood and soil. The girl pressed herself against him without hesitation, her small hands gripping his shirt. Above them, the door crashed open. Evan heard wood splinter. Heavy steps entered the cabin. The floorboards creaked under massive weight. The girl buried her face in Evan's chest. He wrapped his arms around her, gently, protectively. Slow breaths. Slow movements. Silence. The monsters moved around the cabin, their sharp metal feet scraping the floor. Evan could hear them examining everything: tables, chairs, walls. One of them dragged a claw-like hand along the wooden floor above the basement, right above their heads. Evan held the girl tighter to stop her from trembling too loudly. Her small fingers dug into his arm, desperate for safety. Then, a strange sound vibrated through the room. A low, humming growl. It felt like someone was sniffing the air, searching for her scent. The girl looked up at Evan with terrified eyes. She placed both hands on her chest and pressed tightly. Her glow dimmed further, as if she was trying to hide her energy from them. Evan whispered, barely audible. "Good. Stay hidden. Stay quiet." The humming grew louder. Then footsteps approached the trapdoor. The girl's breath caught. Evan slowly placed his hand over her mouth, not harshly, but softly to keep her from gasping. A claw tapped the trapdoor twice. Tap. Tap. Evan felt the girl's body go still. Then silence. Nothing moved. Not the cabin. Not the floorboards. Not even the air. The creature stood there, waiting. Finally, after a long, terrifying pause, it stepped back. Footsteps moved away. More footsteps followed. Evan listened carefully. Boots. Armor, scraping metal until the sounds began fading. Toward the forest again. Minutes passed. 5, 10, 15. Evan didn't move until he was sure they were gone. When he finally opened the trapdoor and checked the cabin, it was empty. Destroyed, but empty. He returned to the girl and offered his hand. She looked at him for a long moment, then slowly took his hand, trusting him with her entire being. Evan knew one thing now. Those creatures were not giving up, and he had made a promise. He would protect her, even if it meant becoming the first human to stand against them. Evan led the tiny alien girl out of the basement with slow, careful steps. The cabin was quiet, now too quiet. A cold silence hung in the air like a warning left behind. Furniture had been knocked over. The door hung crooked, barely attached to its frame. Deep claw marks stretched across the floor, proof that the creatures hadn't just searched. They had hunted. The little girl looked around with wide, frightened eyes. Her tiny fingers clutched Evan's sleeve again. She wasn't crying, she was too silent for that, but her glow flickered weakly, like a candle struggling against a storm. Evan knelt and brushed her silver hair away from her face. "They're gone for now," he whispered. "But they'll come back. We can't stay here." She lowered her head, guilt spreading through her expression. She pointed to herself, then to the door, as if saying, "They came because of me." Evan shook his head firmly. "No, they came because they're monsters. You did nothing wrong. She stared at him for a long moment. And slowly, very slowly, she placed her hand over his heart. A soft glow spread from her fingertips, warm and gentle. Evan inhaled sharply, not in pain, but in surprise. Her touch carried emotions, sadness, fear, hope, and something deeper. She wasn't just showing him what she felt. She was showing him that she trusted him completely. He placed his hand over hers. I won't leave you. Not ever. The girl closed her eyes, as if his words gave her strength. She didn't know she still had. Evan stood and quickly gathered supplies: food, water, a map, a first aid kit, whatever they needed to travel. The girl followed silently, staying close like his shadow. Every time a floorboard creaked, she flinched. Every time wind brushed the window, she grabbed his shirt. But even through her fear, she stayed near him. She had chosen him. When Evan finished packing, he looked at her again. We have to leave before night. Those things move faster in the dark. She tilted her head slightly, then raised her hands and created another soft image with her glowing light. This time, it was a symbol, a star-like shape with a swirling trail. Evan frowned. What does that mean? She pointed to the forest, then to the symbol, then to herself. Evan's eyes widened. Your people? Survivors? The girl nodded. There were others like her, hidden, scared, running, and she wanted to reunite with them. Evan placed his hand on her shoulder. We'll find them. A gentle relief washed over her face, and she gave him a small smile again, the kind that made his chest tighten with warmth and protectiveness. Before leaving, Evan reinforced the cabin door with whatever he could. A part of him hoped they would return someday. But deep down, he knew they wouldn't. The creatures had found this place. It wasn't safe anymore. He guided the girl outside, and they stepped into the forest. The late afternoon sun filtered through the trees, creating long shadows that danced across the path. Birds chirped somewhere above, unaware of the danger that had passed through earlier. Evan held her hand gently. Her small steps matched his, but he could feel her tension. Every rustle of leaves made her squeeze his fingers tight. You're doing great, Evan said softly. You're strong. Stronger than you know. She didn't respond with words, but her glow brightened just a little, like she understood and appreciated his encouragement. As they walked deeper into the forest, Evan kept his senses sharp. He scanned every shadow, every tree trunk. The creatures had left, but hunters rarely gave up prey so easily. Suddenly, the girl stopped. She lifted her hand and pointed upward. Evan followed her gaze. A soft silver light floated in the sky, almost invisible in daylight, but clearly a signal. A beacon. Her people. Her hope. Evan smiled slightly. We're going the right way. The girl stepped closer to him. Her tiny hand gently squeezed his, as if she wanted to say thank you without speaking. But before they took another step, a loud snap echoed from behind. A branch breaking. Evan spun around instantly. The girl's glow dimmed. Someone was following them. Evan moved in front of her protectively. Stay behind me. He didn't know if it was an animal, a creature, or one of the armored hunters, but he was ready. He wasn't just protecting a child anymore. He was protecting the last hope of an alien people, and the one soul who had chosen to smile only for him, and he wouldn't let anything take her away. Evan stood completely still, one hand gently pushing the tiny alien girl behind him. The forest around them looked calm, but the sound they had heard, that sharp crack, it didn't belong to nature. It belonged to something heavy, something with purpose, something hunting. The girl's small fingers tightened around the back of Evan's shirt. Her glow dimmed until she looked almost human in the fading light. She pressed herself close, trembling, trusting Evan with her whole fragile world. Evan whispered, "Stay low. Don't panic." She nodded silently and crouched, her glowing eyes fixed on the shadows between the trees. Another sound came, soft, slow, controlled, not an animal. Not the wind. A deliberate step. Evan scanned the forest carefully. His breath was steady, but inside his heart raced. He had no weapon strong enough to fight those armored hunters. But he had something else, a determination stronger than fear. But you wouldn't believe me, even if I told you. Evan understood that look. He sat down beside the table, but kept a little distance so she'd feel safe. He tried again gently. You can trust me. Whatever happened, whatever scared you, I want to help. Her lips pressed together. Her hands trembled slightly. She wasn't ready to speak, or maybe she didn't know how to explain it. Instead, she placed the bowl aside, stood up, and walked toward the middle of the room. Her small feet made no sound on the wooden floor. She raised her hands slightly, palms open, like she was trying to show something invisible. Evan watched quietly. A soft flicker of light appeared above her palms, tiny particles floating upward like glowing dust. They formed shapes, images, memories. The girl wasn't speaking with words, she was speaking with light. The first image formed clearly. It was her home world. A peaceful place filled with bright colors and floating islands, with creatures that looked gentle and kind. Evan could see other small figures like her tiny alien children running, laughing, glowing with joy. Then the image changed. The sky turned dark. Strange shapes approached. A storm? A ship? He couldn't tell. But whatever it was, it brought fear. The children ran. The ground shook. The tiny girl in front of him lowered her hands. A single tear slid down her cheek. Evan's heart tightened. You're home, he whispered. Something attacked? She nodded slowly. Another flicker of light appeared, this time showing her running through a forest, alone, hiding from tall shadows. The shapes were unclear, but Evan understood enough. Someone was hunting her, someone powerful, someone deadly. When the light faded, the girl looked at him with eyes full of silence and sorrow. Evan stood slowly and walked toward her. Not too close, just near enough that she could feel his presence. I'm here, he said softly. As long as you're with me, no one will harm you. She stared at him for a long moment. Then something happened, something delicate and heartbreaking. She reached up and touched his hand. Only for a second, but that second felt like trust being slowly rebuilt. Her eyes softened. A tiny, fragile smile appeared, just like the one she gave him in the forest. But before Evan could feel relief, something outside made a sound, a low, distant hum. The girl instantly froze. Her glow flickered. Her hands tightened. Evan rushed to the window and looked out. But he saw nothing unusual, just trees moving with the morning wind. But the girl knew. She hurried to him and grabbed his sleeve tightly, shaking her head again and again, her eyes begging him to understand. They found me. Evan felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Whoever they were not far, and they were coming. The moment the distant hum faded into the morning air, the tiny alien girl tightened her grip on Evan's sleeve. Her glowing eyes were filled with fear so sharp that even Evan felt it like a cold touch on his skin. She wasn't guessing. She wasn't imagining danger. She knew something had found her. Evan crouched to her level. It's okay, he whispered, trying to keep his voice steady. I'm here. Tell me. How close are they? She didn't speak. Instead, she raised her trembling hand and pointed toward the forest, toward the same direction where Evan had found her last night. Her fingers shook violently, like her body wanted to run, but her small legs couldn't carry her anymore. Evan understood. They're coming from that side? She nodded quickly, fear tightening her expression. Evan moved toward the wooden cabinet and grabbed his old hunting binoculars. They weren't high-tech, but they were enough to see movement in the trees. He opened the window quietly and looked through them, scanning the forest line. For a long moment, there was nothing, just trees, wind, shadows. Then he saw it, a shape, Tall, too tall to be human. Dark armor that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. The figure stood between the trees like it was smelling the air, searching, hunting. Evan's heart dropped. There was no doubt now. Someone or father. Something was looking for the girl. She tugged on his shirt, urging him away from the window. Her breathing turned fast, almost painful. She pressed her hands together and shook her head with desperate intensity. Evan stepped back from the window. Okay. We'll keep the windows closed. She backed toward the middle of the room, her eyes fixed on the door like she expected it to burst open any second. Evan could see she was shaking so much that she could barely stand. He didn't touch her. Not yet. He didn't want to scare her more. Instead, he took a slow breath and knelt down again. Listen, you're not alone anymore. Whatever is out there, they will not take you. Not while I'm here. She looked at him with wide, fragile eyes. For a moment, her fears softened just a little. Like she wanted to believe him. Like she was searching for strength in his words. Evan stood up and walked around the cabin, checking every window and every lock. He made sure the curtains covered every corner. Then he lit the fireplace again, hoping the warmth would calm her. When he sat back down, she was still standing in the same spot. Small, scared, silent. Come sit, Evan said gently, patting the couch. She hesitated. Then, step by tiny step, she walked toward him. She climbed onto the couch carefully and sat close to him, just close enough to feel protected, but still leaving a little space. Her trust was small, but real. Evan offered her the blanket again. She took it and wrapped it around her shoulders. Her glowing eyes peeked out from behind the fabric. What do they want? Evan asked softly. She lowered her head. Her hands slowly raised again, and glowing particles formed above her palms. This time the image was darker. It showed tall, armored figures the same shape Evan saw, outside walking through the ruins of her world. One of them reached toward tiny glowing children like her. The image broke suddenly. As if the memory hurt her too much to continue, Evan's jaw tightened. So they destroyed your home. And they're hunting survivors. The girl nodded slowly. And you? You ran, alone. She looked at him with tears in her eyes. She didn't need words. The images, her fear, her silence, they all spoke for her. Evan felt something heavy and protective grow inside him. This child didn't just need shelter. She needed someone willing to stand between her and the monsters chasing her. He placed his hand on the couch. Not touching her, but letting her see it, an invitation. To his surprise, she slid a little closer. Very carefully, she placed her tiny glowing hand on top of his. Her fingers were cold, fragile, but her touch carried trust stronger than anything he had ever felt. Evan gave her a reassuring nod. I won't let them take you. Not now, not ever. Suddenly, loud crack echoed from the forest. The girl flinched violently. Evan jumped to his feet. Heart pounding. Another sound followed. Branches. Breaking. Footsteps. Heavy, slow, searching. Shadows in the trees were moving closer. Monsters hunting her had arrived, and Evan realized the worst part. They weren't just looking for her. They had already found the cabin. The heavy footsteps outside did not stop. They grew louder, clearer, closer. Each thud sounded like a giant hand knocking on the earth itself. Evan's cabin was small, but tonight, it felt like a thin wall between safety and danger. The tiny alien girl stood frozen on the couch, her little hands shaking so hard that the blanket slipped to the floor. Her glowing eyes were fixed on the door. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe loudly. She looked like a child who had already lived through horrors far greater than this. Evan whispered, "Stay low. Don't move." She nodded, sliding down from the couch and hiding behind it. Her small body crouched tightly, trying to make herself invisible. Evan moved quietly to the shelf, grabbed the thick metal flashlight, the heaviest object he owned. It wasn't a weapon, but it was something. He didn't plan to fight unless he had no other choice. He only wanted to protect her. He peeked through a tiny gap in the curtain, and his heart almost stopped. 3 armored figures stood outside the cabin. Tall, dark, and silent. Their armor was unlike anything he had ever seen, shadows clinging to them like living creatures. They didn't walk like humans. They moved with slow, hunting precision. The girl sensed his fear. Without seeing them, she crawled forward, touched his ankle gently, and pointed again toward the forest, then made a trembling gesture with both hands. Evan understood. More were coming. He whispered back, "We can't run. They'd catch us outside." She looked down, her tiny fingers curling tightly. He saw something in her eyes, not hopelessness, but guilt, as if she believed she was bringing danger to him. Evan knelt beside her. "Hey," he said softly, "this is not your fault. You're not alone anymore, okay?" Her eyes glistened. Before she could react, a deep metallic sound echoed across the cabin, a slow, heavy bang on the front door. The girl whimpered silently. Evan grabbed her wrist and gently pulled her back. "Basement," he whispered. Now, they moved quickly but quietly toward the trapdoor near the kitchen. It was small and old, filled with storage boxes. Evan rarely opened it. Tonight, it was their best chance. The night was quiet, and the small human settlement on the edge of the forest was almost asleep. Soft lights glowed from the houses, and a cool breeze moved through the trees like a calm whisper. But one man, Evan Reed, was still awake. He could not rest. Something in the darkness kept pulling his attention toward the woods. He did not know why, but he felt that someone or something needed help. Evan was not a soldier, not a scientist, and not a hero. He was just a simple man who lived alone, far away from the noise of the cities. He liked peace. He liked silence. But tonight, the silence felt different. It felt heavy, like it was hiding something. As he stepped outside, he heard a faint sound, so faint that he almost thought it was his imagination. It was not a cry. It was not a scream. It was just a soft breath, like a small creature trying to stay quiet. Evan's heartbeat changed. He knew the forest well. Every sound had a meaning. But this sound, this one was new. He slowly walked toward the trees with a torch in his hand. The light cut through the darkness like a thin blade, and the shadows moved aside as he walked deeper into the forest. Each step made the sound a little clearer. It was gentle, weak, and trembling. Then he saw her, a tiny girl, no more than 7 or 8 years old, sitting on the cold ground with her knees pulled to her chest. Her skin had a soft glow, almost like moonlight. Her hair was thin and silver, gently falling over her face. Her eyes were not human. They were large, bright, and filled with fear. She was an alien child, but the most shocking thing was her silence. She did not cry. She did not speak. She did not even breathe loudly. She just sat there, small and frightened, as if the whole universe had abandoned her. Evan froze for a moment. Not because he was afraid, but because he could see how deeply scared she was. He slowly crouched down at a safe distance so he would not frighten her. "Hey," he whispered softly. "It's okay. I won't hurt you." The girl did not move. She only stared at the torchlight, her body shaking lightly. Evan placed the torch gently on the ground so the light would not feel harsh to her eyes. Then he slowly extended his hand, not to touch her, but to show her that he came with peace. "It's cold," he said. "You shouldn't be out here alone. Do you need help?" Still, she said nothing. But something in her eyes changed. A small spark appeared, small, but real. It was the spark of hope. Evan knew she understood him. He could feel it as clearly as he felt the breeze. So he spoke again, carefully choosing simple words. "I won't force you. But if you come with me, you'll be safe. I promise." The tiny alien girl looked at his hand. Slowly, very slowly, she loosened her grip on her knees. Her trembling fingers hesitated, then stretched forward just a little, but she still did not touch him. She only watched him. Evan waited. He did not rush her. He let her decide. After a long moment, the girl stood up. She was weak. Her legs almost failed her. Evan instinctively reached forward, but he stopped himself. He didn't want her to feel trapped. Instead, he gave her space. "You can walk beside me," he said gently. She took one shaky step, then another. She moved closer to him, but still kept a small distance. Evan walked slowly, making sure she could keep up. When they reached the edge of the forest, she suddenly stopped. Evan turned to see what happened. And then it happened. Very slowly. Very softly. The tiny alien girl lifted her face and looked at him with her big, glowing eyes. And for the first time that night, she smiled. It was small, silent, and fragile. But it was real. A smile full of trust. A smile full of relief. A smile that said she felt safe for the first time in a long time. Evan felt something warm in his chest. That small smile carried more meaning than 1,000 words. He knew at that moment that his life had just changed forever. Evan stood still for a moment, surprised by the gentle smile the tiny alien girl had given him. It wasn't a normal smile. It was the kind that carried fear, hope, and exhaustion together. A smile that belonged to someone who had been alone for far too long. Evan knew that something terrible must have happened to her. No child, human or alien, should ever look that tired. He kept his voice soft. "You're safe now. Let's go inside." The little girl lowered her head slightly, as if showing she understood. She stayed close, but not too close. She walked beside him like a frightened deer, following the one person she trusted. Her steps were small and uneven. Every few seconds, she looked around like something was chasing her from the shadows, even though nothing was there. Evan noticed this. Whatever she had escaped from, it had left deep fear inside her. He led her toward his small cabin, the only house near the edge of the forest. It wasn't fancy. Just a wooden home with warm light, a fire inside, and shelves filled with books and tools. But tonight, it was a shelter for someone who desperately needed one. When they reached the door, Evan pushed it open slowly. Warm air touched her face. She took a tiny breath and stepped inside cautiously, like she had never seen a human house before. But maybe she really hadn't. The girl stood in the entrance, hugging her arms close to her chest. Her silver hair glowed softly in the warm light. Her big eyes scanned the room like she was trying to understand where she was. "It's okay," Evan said. "This is my home. You can stay here until you feel safe." She didn't speak. She only blinked, then looked up at him again. There was a small tremble in her lips, not fear, not sadness. Something else. Something she was trying very hard to hide. Evan moved slowly toward the kitchen and poured warm water into a small cup. He held it out for her to see. "It's warm. It will help." The girl stared at the cup for a long moment. Her fingers twitched as if she wanted it, but didn't know if she was allowed to take it. Evan placed the cup on the table and stepped back to give her space. After a few seconds, she walked to the table. She lifted the cup with both hands, as if it was precious. She brought it close to her face and breathed in the warm steam. Then she took a tiny sip. Her shoulders relaxed. For the first time, Evan saw a hint of calmness in her. But then she suddenly froze. Her eyes widened, and she turned her head toward the window like she sensed something outside. Something dangerous. Evan followed her gaze, but the night outside was empty. "Just trees and darkness. What is it?" he asked gently. The girl did not answer. She couldn't, but she moved closer to him, clutching the cup against her chest. Her small body shook. Evan could feel it. She was terrified of something out there. He knelt down so his eyes were level with hers. "You're safe here." Whatever scared you, it won't get inside. I promise. Her breathing softened. Slowly, she reached forward and touched his sleeve, not his hand. Just the sleeve, like she was testing if he was real. Evan didn't move. After a moment, she let go and stepped back. He gave her a small blanket and pointed to the couch. You can rest here. The girl walked to the couch but didn't lie down. Instead, she sat on the edge, watching him closely. Her eyes followed every movement he made. Not with fear, but with a strange kind of curiosity. As if she was trying to understand why a human would help her. After a while, her eyelids grew heavy. She wanted to stay awake, but her body couldn't fight the exhaustion anymore. She leaned back slowly. The blanket slipped a little, and Evan walked over to fix it gently. The moment his hand lifted the blanket, the girl opened her eyes again. But this time, she didn't look scared. She looked grateful. Evan smiled softly. Sleep, I'm right here. Her eyes finally closed. Her silver glow dimmed slightly as sleep took over. The room became quiet, except for her slow, peaceful breaths. But Evan couldn't rest. He sat on the chair nearby, watching over her. Questions filled his mind. Who was she? Where did she come from? What happened to her? And why? Why did she only smile for him? He didn't know the answers, but he knew one thing. Clearly, this tiny alien girl hadn't just found his house. She had found him, and whatever danger she was running from. It was only the beginning. Evan stayed awake for a long time, sitting in the wooden chair near the couch, watching the tiny alien girl sleep. Her gentle silver glow faintly lit the room like a soft night lamp. She looked peaceful now, but he could still see the marks of fear on her face, shadows under her eyes, tension in her small hands, and the way she curled herself tightly under the blanket, as if protecting something deep inside her heart. Her silence wasn't normal. It wasn't just quietness. It felt like she couldn't speak, or perhaps was too afraid to. Outside, the wind brushed the trees, creating a low whisper. The world was calm, but Evan could feel something approaching, an unseen pressure, like danger hiding just beyond the forest line. Finally, the girl stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, and she blinked at the warm light of the room. For a moment, she seemed confused, as if she had forgotten where she was. But then her gaze found him, and she relaxed. Evan spoke softly. Morning. Did you sleep well? She didn't answer with her voice, but she gave a tiny nod. A very gentle one. Enough to show she understood. Evan felt a relief he didn't expect. He brought her a bowl of soup, simple, warm, safe. She sat up straight, her small hands wrapping around the bowl like it was the first real comfort she had felt in days. As she ate, she kept glancing at the window, again and again, like she was afraid something outside would find her. Evan noticed it. Is something out there? He asked quietly. The girl froze. Her spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. Her eyes widened a little, not in panic, but in warning. She slowly shook her head. No.